Hello, this is part two of the lesson where we are looking at the objection or response to property dualism and the knowledge Mary argument in particular, that qualia cannot exist. So we've got to the stage where we've brought in this notion that the history of science is full of examples where imaginary objects are created because it helps with our understanding, but they're discarded as we find out them to be false. And the claim is that qualia, these mental objects, have a similar property, and we can eliminate them. They can be eliminated from our understanding of the world and our use of language as we develop more proper understanding of the physical processes going on. And eventually, once we fully understand how the brain works, then all this talk of minds will simply be redundant and unnecessary. So the example given about these kind of layers around the earth that people used to believe in and now realise is just complete nonsense. People respond back, well, yes, but this is not the same as qualia, because qualia are directly perceived, whereas actually no one did ever perceive a layer of crystal spheres around the earth. So there is a difference, and the example is not a good one. However, the Churchlands do come back with an example from the science of heat. In the history of science, people used to believe in a substance called caloric. And people used to think that this substance was possessed or part of objects which caused things to be hot. So we directly perceived the heat, and people used to directly think that there was something which was heat, caloric. However, of course, we know that there is no such substance, which is heat, and we know that heat is connected to the energy possessed in the atomic particles of the objects. So therefore, as we have understood more about the atomic structure of substances, and we realise that heat is not a thing as an object, and therefore we've discarded or eliminated the term caloric from our scientific discourse. So it's not the case that the objects in science that we discard are things we didn't perceive. There were things that we have perceived and believed to be the case, which nonetheless we realise, as we have learnt more about the world, about physics, we have realised they are not real. And so therefore, the eliminativists would argue that that reply or response back is not a valid one. Now, if we then move it further, we've got Daniel Dennett. Daniel Dennett is in the textbook with a quote right at the beginning explaining why it's hard to argue against qualia. But ultimately, his response isn't just to deny their existence, but rather to say that the whole idea of qualia is just inconsistent. It's just a nonsense of an idea. So what he does is he tries to bring out, okay, what are these qualia? What properties do they possess? And he then describes and explains them, explaining, yes, they have an intrinsic nature. They are directly accessible. We perceive them. They're private. Only we can see our qualia. And in the textbook, he creates a little table explaining them, the standard view on qualia. Okay, and so what he then does, he attacks, he builds up and expands and explains the notion of qualia, and then just says, this is not a coherent notion. And one way he does that is by talking about this example. So, he gives the example that there are some patients. The example that some patients, when they're on morphine, sometimes report being in pain, but then say, but this is not unpleasant. So they say, yes, I'm in pain, but it's not unpleasant. There we go. There's the patient on his morphine, suffering pain, but not finding it unpleasant. Okay, so this is sometimes called reactive disassociation. And then it asks the question, he poses the question, how can this be? How can it be that you're in pain, but you're not finding it unpleasant? And he'd argue, well, clearly what's going on is that if we think about qualia as we understand them and as described, clearly that can't be applied to this case. And the notion of what's happening here is can't be explained by the standard view of qualia, because, well, clearly, is he in pain or is he not in pain? And there is an element that qualia is unable to justify here, and qualia can't explain this situation as defined by the standard view. Okay, so the Dennett argument is defined in the learn more. So if the Dennett argument is a bit more challenging at this stage, don't panic. Focus on the Churchland's argument they've put forward and concentrate on that. The other thing that's worth doing is looking at the Stanford Encyclopedia. There's a whole big section on qualia, and I'm going to put a link to that when I send you these videos. Okay, so I'll also put a task to try and consolidate the knowledge, and you have a week to complete the task, and I look forward to submitting it next Tuesday. And that's it for Tuesday's philosophy, and I will be in contact for Friday. All the best, take care, bye.